Thank you very much. How exciting to be here. There are so many people that I know on the web that live in this area that when I was offered the opportunity to come and share with you today, I was very excited and really stepped on that opportunity right away because I knew how exciting it would be. I wanted to let you know that any of the resources that I present in this session or in the workshop that's coming up will be available on my wiki. So I wanted to pull that up and show it to you. So there's only one address you really need to have if you want to get to any of the resources, and that will be 21stcenturylearning.wikispaces.com. When you go to the space, you simply go to Tech Forum, and then you'll be able to pull up and go into either one of the spaces. And the cool thing is that as I go through, even if I just kind of mention something, I put extra resources in here, like this Seth Godwin video, definitely one you want to check out, okay? So a little housekeeping there just to let you know how you can have access. I usually like to show my audiences that because today is about passion, and as I get passionate talking about what I'm talking about, I tend to get a little fast. Now, I know that I'm amongst a whole group of fast talkers, so that should be okay. But I just want you to feel comfortable that anything that I say, PowerPoints, resources, anything I allude to, if I buzz right by it, you know, don't worry. You'll have to buckle in for the ride, but you'll be able to go back and find the information. I did want to start with a video that maybe some of you have seen, but I think it will set the tone for what we're going to talk about. It wasn't designed for education, but I think it speaks so well to where we are today, how the world is changing, and what many of you find yourselves spending your life doing these days. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. Twice. Let's see if you remember this one.
Welcome.
Do we have volume?
Welcome to a brand new day. A new way of getting things done. Welcome to a place where maps are rewritten and remote villages are included. A place where body language is business language. Where people subscribe to people, not magazines. And the team you follow now follows you. Welcome to a place where books rewrite themselves. Where you can drag and drop people wherever they want to go. And a phone doubles as a train ticket, plane ticket, or lift ticket. Welcome to a place where a wedding is captured and recaptured again and again. Where a home video is experienced everywhere at once. Where a library travels across the world. Where businesses are born, countries are transformed, and we're more powerful together than we ever could be apart. Welcome to the Human Network.
So I don't know about you, but really, truly, if you wanted to sum up my presentation, I could really sit down now because that says it. I mean, how many of you can relate to that video? I mean, the human network, and that we are transparent, and that, you know, before we were confined by four walls, now the walls have been knocked down and your students really have access to anyone, everywhere, at any time. You know, just think about it. It's an amazing time to be alive, isn't it? It's an amazing time. I'm so excited. And this media-rich generation that we're working with has visually pleasing information at their fingertips with just a click of a button. The world pops and sparks, competing for their attention, and they have so much available to them. I mean, just as you were watching in the film, or even here at this conference, there's so much mobile technology that's available. How many of you are blogging this event? You're live blogging. Raise your hand if you're going to be blogging as you go through the conference today. Some of you, that's great. Anybody using Twitter right now, and you're back channeling? So we've got, you know, we've got it going by video. There might even be somebody Ustreaming. So this conference really, there's so much technology. It's so pervasive, and everywhere all the time. The kids that we're teaching in our classrooms, basically they take the world in via cell phones, handheld gaming devices, PDAs, and laptops that they take everywhere. They're truly mobile. At home, they mainline electronic media, don't they? I mean, they just kind of go home. My son, his bedroom probably could run NASA with some of the things that he has in there. And he will just come in and he'll plug in, you know, and he's in there, and occasionally I'll go get him and say, come on, we want to get to know you. Come out of the, you know, the cave. But they use this electronic media in the form of computers, TV, collaborative games, and they play with users they've never met online around the world. How many gamers do I have in the room? Yeah, me too, you know, and you get on and you play with these people. My son, I'll tease about him a lot because he's probably, all my children, I have 4, are heavy computer users, and they all use them in different way, but he's the only boy. And so it's kind of interesting watching the utilization of it that he has. But he has this backpack thing, and it's orange, it's sort of, and it comes the whole way. I tease him when he has it on that he looks like Pilgrim's Progress, because what he does is he picks up his desktop computer, this huge gaming machine, he puts it in this backpack, and then he trots off to the guy's house, whosever house it is, where they're going to play games, you know, online with other people. And it's really funny because you'll have all these guys in the room together. There's pizza, there's whatever that particular house is serving, because we have our turn where they have to come. Of course, none of them have girlfriends, but they are online and they're having a great time, you know. I'm teasing. He's real cute. He's got a girlfriend. She goes to Virginia Tech, of course, but she is. Everywhere they go in society, technology beacons. You know, kiosks, ATM, Walmart, even at church, you know, our places of worship where we go to worship. The future's just rushing at these kids, full speed ahead. You know, everywhere they go until they enter, da-na-na-na, the learning zone, our schools. And time stands still. Now, maybe not in your schools, but in a lot of the schools around the world today. They're required to leave all communication devices at home. They often sit in rows and columns. We schedule their bathroom and food breaks around bells, and they listen forever to wah, 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 the teacher. And, you know, for some, it's really akin to culture shock because of the way that their life is and the kinds of things that they're involved in. If you don't think the world's changed since we went to school, check this out. I mean, this is a sign of the times. It's kind of interesting because flying here, I noticed that even in the Cincinnati airport where I landed, they had one. Originally, I saw this about 2 years ago. I was on my way to New Zealand, and I was in the Dallas airport, and I went up and saw that there was a vending machine, and instead of candy or something inside of it, it had these types of devices, iPods, and different types of electronic devices. And the interesting thing that really caught my eye is that you used your cell phone to purchase. You're able to use your cell phone or your BlackBerry to purchase. And I thought, if that isn't a change, you know, then what is? So I have to ask you this question. You know, are you ready for the 21st century teaching and learning? Are you ready? Because it isn't coming, it's here. We're 8 years into it. The party has started. You know, these kids, they're already at the party. And some people would say, different advocates would say that because of the speed of the technology, the accessibility of the technology, and the way that we can use it, that you can take instrumentation that runs graphs and plotting much quicker than we could ever do it and fit it into your pocket, that this 21st century business isn't coming, that it's here. And so we've got to be ready for it. We've got to be ready. So you really haven't seen anything yet. You know, it's really just starting to crank up. Everybody remember Web 1.0? How many of you were part of the DOS generation when you first started using technology? Me too. Remember that beautiful green screen? And you type in the codes? And then I remember Mosaic came along. That was the first browser. Did any of you remember Mosaic? And Mosaic came, and we thought that was better than bread and butter, didn't we? I mean, I remember how pumped I got. I got so excited because here I am sitting in the room, and I'm clicking on it, and I'm going to listen to Beethoven. So the kids aren't going to go to the encyclopedia, look it up, and read a little bit and write a paragraph about him. We're listening to his music, baby. And it was just, we moved from that interface where we had to type everything into that GUI environment, graphical user interface, with everything was point and click. And then it really started to take off because lots of people got on, because it was all users could do it without having to have a special wisdom or knowledge. But it really still didn't change very much. Think about your classrooms or your schools or your organizations back then. Basically, when you were using Web 1.0, it was cool. We could go over and we had some web pages and they were hyperlinked. I remember David Thornburg telling this story where he says that the Today Show was going to come and they were going to videotape him. And his kids were at the house. He had teenagers at the time. And he said, the wife said, "Hey, aren't you excited? The Today Show is going to come film your dad surfing the internet." you know, because it was real cool. You could click on something to go link, and it would go to another page and go to another page. And the kids looked and they said, doing what? And they said, surfing the internet. And they said, boring. And one of them goes over to the refrigerator and says, look, film me, I'm using technology, you know. And I thought, that's great. So it wasn't very disruptive. It didn't change the way we did things very much at all. It pretty much, we could still teach school the way we'd always taught school, whatever way that was, and it didn't shake us up too bad. But then along came Web 2.0, and boy, you talk about disruptive. You know, right in the middle of, one time I was doing a presentation like this, and I said, you talk about disruptive, and I forgot to turn Skype off, and I'm just having this flashback that I didn't turn it off again. And right about that time, Skype rang, and I had a call come in. And I said, you know, that's there you go, VoIP, disruptive technologies. But that we would use the technologies like Twitter, like Flickr, you know, like the social networking sites, MySpace, Facebook, and all the ones that are coming up for education, Second Life, and that we couldn't teach the same way anymore. It wasn't page 59 in the textbook and answer the questions at the end. That these tools required us to truly change our practice and to think about how we're doing things and how that's going to be different. But just when you thought it was safe to go back on the computer, dun dun, dun dun, here comes Web 3.0, and that's not coming either, that's here. And Web 3.0 has a lot to do with avatars. You don't want to go to school? No problem. In a couple years, if you don't want to go, send your avatar. They'll do your bidding for you. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know, how many of you go to Second Life? Any of you using Second Life? So you've seen what it's like. Right now, it's very Wild West-like. You know, there's places in there that are pretty good and safe, but you can do anything there. It's awesome. I had this one kid who was not able-bodied. He was stuck in a wheelchair. And one of the things he really said that he loved to me about it is that it would enable him to walk. It enabled him to fly. He could do things and visualize. He could picture that wasn't as though it were. And so it was very cool for him because he was able to see things that were not. Second Life is a wonderful opportunity to be able to use innovation. So some of you out there are saying, come on, lady, I can barely keep up with my first life, and now you want me to add my second one? Why would you use Second Life? I get that a lot. People say, why? Why bother? Here's a reason. Okay, so relationships now, because of technology, are pretty much worldwide. We all go across the world. We all have relationships. We have chat buddies in different places. We bring people in. Because I had great buddies in New Zealand or Australia, China, and the Super Bowl was coming, we wanted to watch the Super Bowl together. But you can't just invite them to your Super Bowl party, because if you do that, they're not going to be able to afford the ticket and show up. So we thought, let's have a Super Bowl party in Second Life. But the problem was, in the office, where my office is, I didn't have enough seating. Because, you know, you've got to set up tables and prepare virtual food, so when the avatars come walking in, they have a place to sit. You don't know how long it took for me to make my avatar sit. She kept falling off the chair. She climbed up on the top. It's a real skill. So anyway, so you've got to have a place for all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have time. Who's got time to figure out code for couches, right? Virtual couches. But there were people that did have the code for couches because that was kind of what they did. They had time and they liked creating pieces of furniture that were very beautiful and unique to add the aesthetic feel to Second Life so that it had that culturalness to it. So I said, hey, I tell you what, I'll purchase the couches from you. So using Linden Bucks, which are available through PayPal, available in every currency around the world, I was able to purchase the furniture that I needed. So when my guests came and we streamed the Super Bowl through a television in Second Life so that it actually streamed, and we could all be there together, have a party, and do that kind of thing. People around the world are actually making millions of dollars selling virtual objects to this kinds of thing. So I say that to say, not run out, get on Second Life. I say that to you to say that Web 3.0 is here. We might be working on Web 4.0. I haven't read that book, thank goodness. I can't get sleep as it is. But some people talk about singularity, and singularity is where artificial intelligence, where machines will actually start to show emotion. We'll have the robots in the house that'll do that kind of thing. So I just want you to know that if you weren't scared already, that things are changing, and that we do need to stay on top of our game, but we're going to need, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, there needs to be balance as well. So here's some changing statistics for you. Grab my notes. All right, so right now in this changing world, there's over 1 billion people connected to the web, and they say that'll double in a decade. 1 billion, it'll double. The internet contains 1 trillion links on 100 billion web pages with 7 million being created daily. 2.7 million posts per day. Only a handful of us were blogging in 1999, 70 million blogs today, and 80 new ones are being created every minute. You know, for educators, what that means to us is that if we don't get on board with this or help our students find their online voice, that this form of literacy is really going to put us at risk of being left behind in the global economy. And you know, the interesting thing is cell phones. I mean, how many of you allow cell phones in your school? The kids are able to use them and you have them on. Raise your hand high for me so I can see. You guys are innovators. You know, pay attention to those districts. Cell phones are getting more and more powerful. You know, it serves as a watch. How many of you use your cell phone for your clock? I can't tell you the number of times I ask people if they got it right. It serves as my alarm clock. It wakes me up in the morning. It has music on it, so it provides my music. It's a camera. It does my digital pictures. I can surf the web on it. It has calculators in it. I mean, I Google things via my cell phone. And it's the first thing we have them do when they come into our schools? Cut the thing off. Now, the ones that I saw in New Zealand, it was amazing. In New Zealand, everybody had cell phones. In fact, most of the kids showed up double-fisted. They had one in each hand. And the reason they did is because their founders weren't as wise as ours and didn't apply for the E-rate, so their bandwidth is really at a premium. But I found that most interesting is that the top user of text messages, the reason they have two is because they needed 2 carriers because they can't have unlimited texting. But guess who was doing most of the texting when I was there? The mothers. People like my mother, not their mother, like my mother. It was the older people that were really doing most, and they did it with their thumbs too. There was none of this finger stuff like I do. So it's pretty amazing that if we talk about we don't have enough technology, but yet they come with these devices and that we really need to allow them to be able to use them. You know, with knowledge increasing at such a rate, we couldn't memorize it even if we wanted to. I mean, it's estimated that the knowledge being created, the content being created in 1 year is more than the previous 5,000 years. And you know, that knowledge creation can be problematic because a child today is exposed to more information in 1 year than we were in our lifetime. Got a cute story to tell. I was in one of my classes at William & Mary, and one of my students, pre-service teachers, brought in a save the date card. You know how you do those before you're getting married? And what she had done is she had used Photoshop, and both her and her fiance had had a Burger King party when they were little. And so they each had pictures with the crown on, you know, sitting at the Burger King table. So what they did is they went and she Photoshopped them in together. So you've got him like this with his crown on, and she Photoshopped a thumb on her, so she's like this. She said when Grandma looked at it, she went, Darren wasn't at your birthday party. Yeah. So it can be very problematic. You know, basically what it says is that for a student who's starting a degree, a 4-year degree, that halfway through, much of what they learned in that first year is really going to be outdated. You know, that's what we have to ask ourselves. How much time should we spend helping students memorize things that they're going to recite back or be tested upon if knowledge is expanding at that rate? There's not really any way we could contain it. There's not a pot that will be big enough to put the information in as our disciplines and our fields change. And so we really need to think about that. This is gives a kind of a demonstration of how things have accelerated and how the pace of life really has picked up. This diagram shows reaching 50 million users, and you can see radio. It took about 38 years for radio to really take hold. Television, it was about 13 years when you had up to 50 million users and it was in the home and it was very prevalent. Cable, knocked some of that off. Digital camera, only 8 years. The internet, 5 years, and camera phones, 3.5 years. So you can see that how it's accelerating and how things really are changing. There's various shifts and trends. You know, right now, for you to remain with the status quo really means that very quickly schools are not going to be relevant in the lives of the students we teach. And so we have to look at what are the shifts, what are the trends, what are the drivers affecting this change, and what does it all mean? I mean, if you ask anybody that, you know, that comes and speaks, like I have an opportunity to go to a lot of these conferences, and people will call me an expert, and I just kind of laugh because with things changing this quickly, nobody's an expert. You know, by the time I get off the stage, there'll be 10 new things that I haven't mastered. And so we're all in this together. It's not business as usual, it's business as unusual. Peter Vail tells a very interesting description where he talks about it's all like we're all in constant whitewater. Does it feel like that to you? I mean, we're just like, you know, you never know what's coming. So this journal article that was in the Journal of School Improvement, and I've got it here if you want to actually refer to it, came up with 10 trends or 10 shifts that are actually affecting children in the classroom today. It's a great article, 10 Trends for Educating Children for Tomorrow's World. And what I did is I just picked up a couple of them that I thought were pretty interesting to apply to what our topic today about passion-based learning. And trend one is that the new economy is going to be human capacity. It's about building relationships and building children and looking and helping them to reach their potential. And one way of doing that, of course, is through personal learning networks, isn't it? How many of you know what I mean by the term personal learning networks? Yeah. Here's an example of a personal learning network. Last year I had an opportunity to go to New Zealand. I had a childhood dream, always wanted to go. And they invited me to do a series of keynotes where I was going to go across the country and speak. They'd kind of bring the conference to the people and move it through like that. And I realized I knew nothing about the New Zealand education system. I knew nothing about what their problems were, what their struggles were. And so what I was going to do is put on this cape, and I was going to dive into the New Zealand conferences and say, ta-da, the Americans here, I'll solve your problems, when I didn't have a clue. So what I decided is that what I probably better do is build a personal learning network that would help me know that. Now, sometimes people see personal learning networks as see how many friends you can get, and even though I don't really know their name or their birthday, or if they have children or where they work, I call them in my network. A personal learning network to me is people that you connect with that you truly are going to learn from. That these are people that you're going through this journey together where you're trying to figure these shifts and changes out. So you can see in the middle here, we had K-12 online. We started talking about that, and it started out where Wes, Darren, and I were having conversations, and then, Will and I, and then Wes from Oklahoma got involved because Will had to back off. Well, Will got invited to go by Tony to New Zealand, but he couldn't go. So he recommended Miguel and I to go. And so Miguel and I hooked up with Heidi and Sarah, and we said, do you know any New Zealand educators where we can start to talk to some people? So they brought in Jane, and Jane gave us the Tuan's Wiki blog, which introduced us to all these people. So there's Skype conversations, Illuminate. My daughter decided she was going to go with me, and so she's a crafter and a webmaster, and so she started putting things out on the board she was on and connected with all these people so that as we went through New Zealand and I worked my hiney off, she got to go have fun and see the country because of all her personal learning network. And so you can see that Graham, who's a friend of mine in Australia, said, well, I know Derek, I'll introduce you to Derek. And out of Derek and I have done many projects since. It was a wonderful relationship. Paul in Wales said, well, I know Alana King, who's a phenomenal elementary educator in New Zealand. And she introduced, she said, well, my cousin's a principal, and so you can see how those connections happen and that network develops. And so one of the ways of build the new economy is not so much what you know, it's who you know, and then how you're able to connect to them, so that everybody's sharing ideas and everybody's sharing information. I'll tell you another way that this trend is playing out is through situated communities of practice. Now, personal learning networks take place everywhere. But a community of practice, usually, you may have heard it termed a walled garden. A community of practice is usually a group of people who are working in the same kind of environment. They might be all shipbuilders, they might all be in the medical profession. And so Will Richardson and I have this company that's called Powerful Learning Practice, and through that, what we do is help schools set up professional learning communities, communities of practice, that we help them build the infrastructure, and then we back away, and they have this healthy infrastructure where they can help to implement these changes and help walk teachers through. Last week, we had our first culminating meeting for one of the cohorts that we took through that process, and it was absolutely phenomenal. It was truly wisdom of the crowds, because as those teachers shared their projects that they had worked on the whole year, and as we did unconference where they each took a topic that they wanted to share about and lead discussions in, they got up at the front. I mean, you could see the leadership, the teacher leadership and the educational leadership that had been cultivated around 21st century literacies. This is a photo stream when you go to the PowerPoint if you're interested in looking at some of the pictures, but you can just see the engagement and the involvement that they have, the kinds of things that are going on. So using communities of practice is another very powerful way that you're seeing this trend play out. The next trend that I wanted to point to is one that excites me. How many of you are big No Child Left Behind supporters? I mean, I know we see the value, but how many of you just are cheerleaders for that? Raise your hand. Come on, come on. No, you're not there with me? Well, I should skip this slide? No, I'm teasing. Basically, here's what's going to happen. It's going to play out well. Because of the shift in the trends and the way things are happening right now, where everything's about standardization of curriculum. We want them all to, just match exactly. We want, I remember when I first got involved in education, I was just amazed because I wanted our school to be the best, and I wanted to be the technological jewel of the city, and, my principal had to sit me down and say, no. In school culture, we all want to be equal, and we want every child to get the same kinds of education. It was a little bit tough for me. Well, in this standardization, this trend towards it, what comes out? You know how when you're trying to meet AYP, you've got all those subgroups, right? Well, in those subgroups, we have to do whatever interventions it takes to make sure that the subgroup comes up and tests well. That's called personalization. So in an effort to meet the requirements of standardization, a demand is going to grow so that for personalization, rather than a system that uses high-stakes testing, we're going to find that we're going to be doing things that are very passion-based, are very motivating, are very engaged for individual students instead of trying to sustain some type of scoreboard mentality. So it's a neat shift. The third shift that I wanted to share out of the 10 is really about communication, and we've kind of looked at how it has increased the pace or the speed of communication today. Well, this is by using participatory media, educators are really going to be able to help their students connect with subject matter experts from around the world. Your schools, you as educators are going to become more and more, I know some of you already are, but you're going to see yourself really as a partner in the educational process. That you'll come in, you'll find out what their interests are, what their passions are, and then you will use these tools to help facilitate connecting them with the experts that they need to find out more. One of my good friends says, the minute you turn on the computer, the minute you get on the internet, you're not the smartest person in the world, in the room anymore. And that's so true. I mean, the people that I connect with online are just amazingly wise. And because of that, I notice that I get wiser. It's sort of like none of us are as good as all of us. And so as teachers are going to find out that they really are going to become partners in that. This is a lot of text, and I don't want you to read it. The reason I put the text here is so that when you go back and download the PowerPoint, you'll have this teacher's story. But basically, I was on Skype. Kathy Evanoff, who was a Teacher of the Year for the state of North Carolina, came on and said, hey, check out this video. I watched the video, and it was so powerful. It was something that students in her school had put together that I asked to interview the teacher and kind of get the story. And what happened is when we had some storms a while back, hurricanes that came through, the bridge in the Outer Banks was sort of torn down. You may be familiar with it, the Bonner Bridge. And it became a very debatable, controversial thing about rebuilding it and then fixing it and doing the things. And so this particular teacher had switched schools in order, because one particular stormy day, the bridge had swung and was doing all, so she had switched schools so she wouldn't have to go through that. And it was right about that time the Minneapolis bridge collapsed. And so it became something that they were very passionate about. The students talked about it. It was in their world. They could relate to it. So they put together a whole service project around this particular issue. And she tells you how she graded it and everything. So be sure you take some time and go back. I'm going to show you the movie that was the end product that the kids created. When you go to the wiki, you'll see that it's that they actually they're on all the lobby sites. The kids are actually going and lobbying on behalf of this, and that it has become truly a very important project and a very important part of her civics and economics class. This is not a project. Let me just clarify something. This was the whole year. This was something in her civics and economics class that the students were passionate about, so what she did is she just turned it into the curriculum. Papert says that we have to get to the place that we let go of the curriculum. That curriculum meaning, I have to teach this at this given time at this given day. You got to let go of that. And you got to realize that as you let students pursue their passions, that as they get engaged and they get excited, just-in-time learning, like you learn, will happen for them too. And when they need to know certain things, like the history of this bridge or how you negotiate to fight for the rights of people in a particular town, or the things they need to know, that will happen. Yes, there are foundational concepts we need to know how to do, but I'm talking about allowing the curriculum, instead of saying set things in this year and set things in this year, developing it around the passions and the interest and letting the curriculum unfold, which will be increasingly important as content expands to the rate we're talking about. So let's watch the video they put together. It's only 2 minutes. The cool thing about this, when I was interviewing her and talking about how they went about putting this together, is that she told me that when she started this, because she had never done, let's just toss the curriculum and let's try to learn everything we need to know about economics and civics within the context of this service project that these kids are so motivated about. She said at first it was very teacher-directed. She said then I sort of let off a little bit, and I guess it was learner-centered. She said, but now it's just student-directed. You know, they just are taking it, they're running with it, their ideas are better than mine, and she's become more comfortable with that. She talks about how she has graded them and the kinds of benchmarks she used, so be sure and take a look at it. It's very powerful. So what we're seeing really is a shift. You know, we've got these trends and shifts and drivers that are impacting us from a teaching focus to a learning focus. You know, it really isn't about us. It shouldn't be about our teaching. It should be about them, and it should be about learning. You know, just because I stand up here and I talk at you, which is probably the worst example we could do, conferences have got to figure out different ways of doing this, but just because I stand up here and do this doesn't mean you're getting it. Who's responsible here? Are you responsible? Should I put the responsibility on the learner? So we've shifted to a learning focus where we need to do the kinds of things so that our kids aren't bored out of their mind, and they're using the kinds of tools and the kinds of learning strategies they do to learn things outside of the classroom. Teaching has moved from a private event to a collaborative practice. We are so transparent now. When I knew I was coming here, I was thinking, okay, I better think about what I'm going to say, because it's not just going to be my cozy rapport and relationship I build with y'all. Who knows who's going to hear this with this many different transparent mediums broadcasting what we're saying? Our walls are down. We can't go in and shut the door anymore. It's a transparent, collaborative process. And when I say collaboration, I don't mean cooperation. I mean that you and I work together, and what we accomplish couldn't happen if one of us weren't there. That what we bring is so unique to that collaborative process that we all both have to be part of that. You know, we've moved from school improvement as an option to school improvement as a requirement being mandated. But, you know, we also are seeing a shift because of educators being the responsible, caring people they are, from what I believe, and I do believe this, to be mandated accountability, like through No Child Left Behind, to mutual accountability. How many of you have read Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat? Great. That should be basic reading for everybody. There are some people pushing back on that now, which I'm going to share in just a minute. But it's really great what he describes. I know when I was talking about it, I saw this cartoon and it says, "No, you may not outsource your homework to India." You know, I thought that's funny. But then when I actually went to these sites and started looking at outsourcing your homework, what I found is that people really are outsourcing their homework. There are people in India and China that are willing and ready to write term papers or to do research or to do anything that you actually need to do, and the kids have the tools and know how to use them to make that happen. So we have to kind of rethink how we're doing things. We have to become adaptive experts. We really need to understand adaptive expertise, not only so that we can own it, because you can't give away what you don't own, but for our students. Now, what do I mean by adaptive expertise? That's the kind of we're building the airplane while we're flying it approach that we have to take sometimes, where we can take our expertise and we can apply it through innovation. Now, how does that happen? Well, in order to be an expert, you have to have a deep foundational understanding of the content of your discipline. Those of you that teach a discipline, how many science teachers, high school science teachers do I have in here? So you have a basic content knowledge of your subject. And so you're able to discuss that, and when you hear other people, language arts, you know, current events, things like that, you're able to take that conceptual framework and apply it and plug it in. And so students need to have that. But when you bring very diverse opinions together like that, and people start playing from their own schematic awareness, from their own knowledge or experience base that they've built, and we're scaffolding that learning on, rather than it being something that is sequential and linear, it's more of a scaffolding process, that out of that comes an adaptive expertise where we can intuitively fix things as we need to and adjust the learning and the teaching as we go. Microsoft presented at one of the conferences I was at, and they put up a rubric that showed how they evaluate their employees and what they go through. And one of them in there was the ability to embrace ambiguity. Show me your lesson plans that are helping students prepare for embracing ambiguity. You know, I asked myself, I said, what am I doing to prepare kids to be adaptive experts or to embrace ambiguity? But yet, we live in a time and an era where there really is what I see as competing interests. There's these irritants that fight against each other, and we see that at the same time the world's changing and pace is picking up, and we've got to hurry up and we've got to do things more effectively and efficiently, quicker, teach them more, get them through. Let's have all year long school, you know, and all these things coming at us in that kind of panic mode that it's coming in. There's also this other side that talks about the value of slowing down, the value of what some people call a slow education. Now, Geetha Narayana, and if I've messed up her name, if somebody knows how to pronounce in Indian, you'll have to correct me afterwards, but she's a very powerful speaker. I've been looking at some of her stuff recently, and she presented at a conference in Australia, and it was very interesting. She talks about slow, wholesome learning. Now, don't get me wrong, she studied under Seymour Papert. She is a technology enthusiast. She looks for ways to bring people and technology and learning together and really designing a new conceptual framework. But she says that just because we can doesn't mean we have to. And she talks to the frenzy that she sees developing around the technological tools. You know, this isn't about tools. The tools are sexy, they're concrete, they're gadgets, we like them. It's kind of like when you get a bunch of fourth graders, the first thing you do is you give them the math manipulatives and you let them explore and make their swords and fight each other and do that thing, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to get on with the learning, you know, with them. So you have to let them have that experience. And what a lot of us are doing is, because the tools are concrete, is that you see if you're in the blogosphere, how many people are regular bloggers and in the blogosphere, you'll identify with what I'm saying, is that once a new tool comes up, it's Twitter. Man, it's like, we run over and we're at Twitter and everybody's Twittering and we're doing that. And then somebody on Twitter will post, hey, Digo, and then everybody goes, we all run over, we're all joining Digo. And we're, you know, I did it too, you know, and you're over there and you're like, okay, I got time to do this right now. It's not applicable, it's not real to me right now. I don't need this tool right now. You know, when we were 5 years old, and maybe earlier for some of you, and you started to use pencil and paper, the technology of the day, it wasn't ever about that pencil or that paper. It was about being able to learn to communicate and to be able to write your ideas and share your thoughts and your ideas. It was never about the pencil. And that's what we have to realize, is that there is a balance. Now, let me get my notes, and I want to tell you what she says about these three things. I've got her paper linked on the wiki, and you need to read it, because how many of you like the movie Matrix? I'm a hardcore Matrix fan, all of them. And she does her very scholarly paper, and she compares it to the blue pill and the red pill, and has some Matrix things in here. But one of the things she talks about that I thought was very interesting is she says there's basically three kinds of people. You have your techno-skeptics, and those are your back to the basics people that say technology's bad, it's taking us horrible places, we really don't need to use it, it's not a good thing, kids need to play, we don't need to have it, we need to do things pretty much like we've done them, school has worked, look at our founding fathers, it's a good thing, let's keep it going, promote drill and practice, and you can't trust internet information, nothing on Wikipedia is allowed anyway, you know? That's those people. And that doesn't mean that's bad, that's just their paradigm, their philosophy. Then you have techno-evangelist, which if I was to guess, I would say most of us, including myself in this room, are probably techno-evangelist. And techno-evangelists are people from a wide range of disciplines. They have a world view that the world is changing at a very rapid rate, and that we need to combine things like virtual simulation and distributive cognition. That, yeah, we need that too, don't we? Bad on you. Because we're all on Twitter and we gotta do something, you know? Yeah, you guys are evil. Now, and that's recorded. Aren't you glad you had me go there? Anyway, that's funny. Basically, they base a lot of what they believe on brain research, learning styles, that kind of thing. And then she brings out this third group, and this is what we really have got to be careful. This opened my eyes when I read her article, and I've really, to be honest with you, started to take a step back and look at my own practice and start to question, am I slipping over into this technomenetics area? She says basically what they do is they settle for the latest fads and fashions in education. Digo. Interest in technology is short-lived and transient. They imitate skeptics and evangelists that serve with all their style. They try to do things that are cutting edge and state-of-the-art. Education to them is like a shopping mall or a theme park. There's no original position on culture. And so basically what she's saying is that if we're not careful, what we're going to do is we're really going to get caught up in some things that might not be where we want to go. That just because we can doesn't mean we have to. That we need to make principled changes in education for sure. And we need to use technology and create kids who have multiple literacies and have digital literacies. And more than anyone else, as the champions of this, we need to understand how to use these tools, but we also need to understand the pedagogy behind them and to quit being so tool-focused and be learning-focused and decide what really is the right tool for the job that's going to meet and help these students to pursue their passions and what they're interested in. You know, creativity is something that's going to become increasingly more and more important. We listen to Ken Robinson, we listen to Daniel Pink, and they tell us that, you know, the way that schools are designed now, I was listening to Seth Godin, and who does some pretty marvelous things. He's into marketing, and he's in the business world, but he was talking about curiosity, and he was talking about how schools, sort of along the same lines as some new things that I've seen Ken Robinson do, talk about how school, the way it's designed right now, really trains creativity and curiosity out of the individual. If you'll think about the average 5 or 6 year old and the kinds of things they do in playing and coloring, how excited they are about learning and that kind of thing. And then as time goes on, usually what I found, because I was in elementary education, that's my training, about 5th grade, they didn't want to do the puppet shows and they didn't want to talk about anything that was creative, and that because not meaning to, we don't mean to, but because of the way that the culture is and the way it's set up, they had been punished over and over and over again for being curious, for asking those questions, for saying why too many times, and so they had actually been educated out of it. And so one of the things that Seth Godin talks about that kind of relates to the same passion-based thing is he said that about the 1950s, TV came about, right? And everybody started watching television, and what they found out is that if you spent enough money to build content and to do programming, that you could make money by interrupting people with ads that they didn't want to get. And then it was sort of cyclic, because then more people would watch, they'd get the jingles in their head, they'd buy these mediocre products, and then you were able to have more money to put more content on to be able, and the cycle just kind of got there. And the point he makes is that some of the smartest and most influential people in the world today are those who have basically killed their TV. They've cut it off. And then instead of having that mediocre marketing and kind of thing coming at us, they're looking for things that are of quality. And many of them are turning to the internet. But aren't we seeing that same kind of thing kind of repeating itself, for now we're being interrupted and bombarded with ads on the internet? And so what he talks about is that we need to pursue curiosity. We need to develop the ability to be curious in our students, and that how important that is. I was online the other day and somebody sent me a quote by Dorothy Parker that said, "The cure for boredom is curiosity, and there's no cure for curiosity." And I put it out on Twitter. And in fact, there was a big discussion that followed that it was Dorothy Parker, and we had to figure out who it was. And David Warlick came on and he said, "Boy, isn't that the truth? We don't see a lot of that in schools, do we? Curiosity." And I can't tell you how important it is that if you don't make any other change but one in passion-based education, would be for you to go and instill curiosity in your students, to have them ask questions, to then allow them the freedom to be able to explore their interest and passions, to be that teacher. To be that teacher that allows students the freedom to be able to remain in this kind of little girl, even as I grow up into my 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. I love this quote by Leonardo da Vinci: "Study without desire spoils the memory. It retains nothing that it takes in." You know, it's when we're motivated, when we're passionate about something, that we retain it. We do. Those of you that have been bitten by Twitter, I mean, you could tell me all about it. You could tell me all about so many of these technologies and whiteboards and, you know, tablets, and you can tell me the things you're seeing kids do because you're passionate about that. It's something that you're interested in, and so when you talk about it, it's delightful. I had a bunch of teachers in a virtual room for a meeting the other day, and I said, "So what have you guys been doing?" And one of the guys said, "Fly fishing." Well, I've never been fly fishing. I live in Virginia Beach. We do a lot of saltwater fishing. I do fish a lot. It is a passion of mine. But I've always thought fly fishing was such a beautiful form and art, the way that it looks. So I started asking questions. This guy lit up. I mean, he lit up. You could tell that it was his passion. And I thought, you know, that's what we need to maximize on when we're working with kids. I have been trying to find balance in my life and change some things. So one of the things I've done is I've started going to a personal trainer. Now, I've never done that before. I should have done it years ago. And I think what's really working for me with the personal trainer is that every time I go in there, nothing's the same. We have not yet done the same set of exercises, except for, getting on the treadmill or the elliptical, but the exercise that she takes me through, and I thought, this is something here. If we could make our classrooms like that, if every time that kids came to our classroom, we could shake it up a little bit and we could make it, because I think what happens is that they do get bored, and boredom does kill curiosity, and that they know what to expect. There's no unpredictability to it. And, it's sometimes that unpredictability that's sort of exciting. I don't know. I've never jumped out of a plane, but I would assume that's why people do it. They don't know what the landing's going to be like. That's the only thing that I could think of why they're drawn to it. But as humans, we sort of drawn to that unpredictability. We like it when it's not predictable and when you can shake it up. So we really need to rethink teaching and learning. We need to think about how we're going to restructure our classrooms and our education so that it's going to be more in line with the needs of the 21st century learner so that we can remain relevant. I mean, the truth is, these kids basically can learn anything, anytime they want outside of your classroom, and they do. So when they come into your classroom, it needs, because you are the sanctuary of learning, it needs to be the coolest, most exciting, most innovative place there is. That needs to be the place where they can get it. And one of the ways that you're going to do that is to become multi-literate. There are new literacies out there. Yes, we all are passionate about text. We all love books. I mean, if you talk to teachers, they'll bring their libraries up and they'll talk about the books they have, and even in Twitter, constantly, the books and things about, and we love that text. We love that linear text. I mean, you just can't curl up with a laptop like you can a good book. Now, PDAs, no, I'm just kidding. But so we've got to be able to have digital literacy. We've got to understand how to speak in the language that I can communicate with an avatar. We're going to need to understand the different kinds of things that these students are going to need for their future, not our present or our past. We need to be able to speak the language that's going to prepare them for jobs that haven't been invented yet. I have teachers that tell me, I speak quite often, and especially in workshops, because I really enjoy seeing teachers through that, that year-long process. I think that's something that's very important in being able to help them work through the issues. And I had a group of teachers tell me, they say, yeah, but you don't understand. Here you go, computers, 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 and now we're outsourcing and we've got all this. You're going to talk us right out of a job. And I looked at those teachers and I said, so you're afraid that a computer can replace you as a teacher? I'll tell you this. If you're sitting in this room and you believe that you can be replaced by a computer, then you probably should be. However, I want you to know the truth. Computers will never replace teachers. However, teachers who use computers will replace those who do not. And that is the truth. So in this designing education and rethinking teaching and learning, we need to make sure that there is a change in pedagogy and the way that we structure our classroom. We need to be thinking about, okay, I understand that building a personal learning network means that I'm going to use these very powerful tools to connect with people in different countries to be able to learn from them. That when I find out that you really know about document cameras because you've done your action research that you were telling me about earlier, I know nothing. I want that research and I want to know why that increased 3 points that the students were more engaged. And so I'm going to add her to my personal learning network, and I'm going to learn from her and her research that she's doing. I need to own that so that I can model that to my students, because predictors say that the #1 job in the future is going to be that of community organizer. Your students are going to need to know how to deal with different genders, different cultures, and they're also going to need to know how to cross the age divide, because people are living longer and working longer. And so they're going to need to understand negotiation skills. There is a standard for that, right? They're going to need to understand some of these 21st century skills that are going to make them successful. We need to change the way we manage classrooms. It needs to stop being top down. It needs to start becoming more of a learning ecology where there's just as many conversations going on from teacher to teacher, as teacher to student, as student to student, and that we come in the classroom eager and ready to learn from our students, and that we're not afraid of reverse mentorship, that we realize that many of them come knowing things that we don't know because they have information available to them 24/7 just like we do. And that there needs to be a move, all right, hold on for this one, from a deficit-based model of instruction to a strength-based model of instruction. Right now what we do is you show up in the classroom, I diagnose what your deficits are, what you don't know how to do, your weaknesses, and then I develop a plan to make sure I fill in your weaknesses. No one has ever achieved excellence, extreme success through that model. Even people in sports. How many of you are sports enthusiasts? What do they tell you? Play to your strengths. You know, you fly where you can fly, you walk where you can walk. But if you want to be a basketball player, don't hang out with hockey players. Hang out with basketball. And so what we've got to do is we've got to move to a model where we come in and I look at what you can do, and I celebrate what you can do, and then I start working on that and building. And what happens is that as you find the weaknesses that you have, you can say, well, if I really want to accomplish this as a student, if I really am interested in ocean kayaking and I really want to become good at that, then I'm going to have to learn to write effectively to be able to communicate with my mentor. Or I'm going to have to get over my fear of water, or whatever the weaknesses are that you're trying to address. So if I'm not good in writing skills and sentence construction, and I don't really understand that, now I have a motivation to learn. Motivation is really key here. When we're talking about passion-based learning, it's really key. And then collaboration and communication inside and outside the classroom. You can't be afraid to let other people teach your kids. You need to open up your classrooms and let experts in. Basically, it boils down to this: formal and informal learning. Now, when I was in the classroom, I was a darn good teacher, but I taught formally. I was Miss Frizzle, though. When they came in, I said, come on, we're going to get on the bus, and you don't know where I'm going to take you. Magic school bus. And I was great, but it was all about me, and it was all about teaching. It wasn't about learning. What we need to look at is we need to change it to a more informal structure where it's the students each get to go where they want to go. Now, is it all willy-wooly? No, it's not. What you do is you set up a certain type of framework that you want them to work within, and you make sure that whatever the project they chose, that they're going to do certain activities within that project that are going to enable them to come out of your classroom having mastered what you want. Now, some people think it has to be an either-or, that either I've got to do standards-based because that's what's being mandated, and that if I didn't, then I'd be creative and I'd do project-based and I'd let kids pursue inquiry and things of that nature. This will produce the rigor that you need for kids to blow the top off the test. We're just so afraid because we're being held so accountable. But if you do that, you'll see. We need to use a multi-channeled approach, lots of different tools, synchronous, asynchronous, peer-to-peer, webcast, face-to-face. All of it needs to be involved. When you're thinking in terms of the classic problem-solving approach, in terms of students coming to you, basically it's a let's fix what's wrong and let the strengths take care of themselves mentality. But when you focus on the strengths of the student, that self-esteem, that self-efficacy takes over, and you will not believe how that spills over into other subject areas. I saw it at W.T. Cook Elementary, which serves some of the most at-risk kids in Virginia Beach, has the highest homeless population of any school in the city, that I would take the kids that were what I fondly called my ruffians, and I chose them to be part of my tech team. And what they would do is they got to wear a hat in school, and being the rebellious, defiant kids that they were, they loved that, so they signed up, and then I taught them to pop open the hood. They worked on the computers. We did everything, and at the time, Virginia had part of our standards of learning. We call them SOLs, because you are if you don't learn. What they would do is those standards of learnings measured technological competencies, certain types of things to make sure that you had technology ability. They don't measure it anymore, so of course it isn't taught. But because we only teach what we measure. So we need to change the metrics and make sure we're measuring what we need to teach, so it kind of starts at that end. But what we found is that some of the kids who had never been successful in any of their academic courses, now for the first time were experiencing real success, and what we tied it back to when we looked at it is because they had scored advanced on the SOLs and that technology component, and it gave them the self-esteem to be able to appreciate what could be, what is, and what will be. You know, if you come to my session, at my breakout session after this, I'm going to teach you how to blossom children, how to help them begin to see that themselves as though they were, and we're going to look at that. You know, spending most of your time working on a weakness, basically, it's going to improve your skills, but it's only going to bring you to the level of average. I can't bowl. I could bowl every day. I might get a little better, but I can't bowl, okay? I'm never going to be a pro bowler. But I am really good at certain other things, and as long as I play to that, then I can be brilliant. I can be exceptional. Basically, engaged learning, passion-based learning, is when we take positive energy invested in one's own learning. I'm in control. I'm learning what I want to learn. Think about the professional development opportunities that you've had. Things that are mandated or pushed on you, you resist. You do. It's human nature. Things that you're interested in and you've pursued on your own, you do an incredible job. And it's the same with students, that they will give meaningful attention, they will participate, they will be involved, and it's because it's around their passions. So this is a very busy screen, but what I want you to see in this is that we want to move from this, living our life in isolated components, teaching our curriculum in isolated pieces, to a very integrated approach. You know, when we started out, and I'm gonna do this with professional development because I think it'll be more meaningful for you to be able to apply to your own experiences, your own schema. When we started out recently, we did expert-centered training, you know? Those of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you still may be in that in certain times of professional development opportunities. This is sort of like that, where it's directed, that it's from the expert, it's discipline-based, it's basically lectures, workshops, small group work, guest speakers. And the learner is passive. Except for those of you that are back channeling, and I hope you're saying nice things, or those of you that are in Twitter, you're very passive and you're just listening as a receptor, which means you aren't going to retain tons of it. So I hope you'll go back to the wiki. Then we moved to what we call a work-based model, where the learner was a worker, and that's the situated learning kind of thing. And that's where we started looking at professional development as something that needed to be facilitated, and that teachers would work on projects together. It would have a workplace focus, but you'd put a team, and the team would have a particular issue that you dealt with in the school. There was mentoring. Maybe they had you join a professional learning community, some of DeFore's work or something. And so what we saw is that learning was then isolated to what happened at work. And when you got home, you didn't really learn anymore. You sort of shut it down and you played. What we need to move to is a life-based model, both in what we're doing with our students in the classroom and what we're doing in our professional development opportunity. Doesn't need to be learner-centered. You hear that it's to be best practice, it's learner-centered. In the 21st century, it needs to be student-directed. It needs to be teacher-directed, learner-directed. It needs to be context-based, so it's what you learn is within the context of what you're learning. So if I'm doing a project on how to save a bridge, I'm learning negotiation skills, I'm learning persuasive speech, I'm learning how to get up in front of an audience, I'm learning leadership, I'm learning how to make digital skills to make movies, I'm learning history, I'm learning about architecture, so that I'm learning lots of things, but I'm learning them in a contextual framework of what I'm interested in. It's holistic, it's strength-based, it's based on what I'm interested in and what I'm strong at, and it's adaptive to the content or to the context. I develop adaptive expertise through that, and that basically is learner as a whole person, a life-based learning model. We need our classrooms to eventually become learning ecologies. And if you look at this, if you examine this later, looking at the wiki, you'll see that includes formal instruction. It includes some of you doing the want, because there's some foundational stuff that has to be laid. And that's valuable. We don't want to just throw that out. But then we want to add to it communities and gaming through simulations, mentoring and performance type objectives, seeing what they can do and that sort of thing. So I'm going to end with this. What is our legacy going to be? Okay, you have to ask yourself, what is our legacy? The Bertelsmann's Foundation did a content study where they looked at sort of like an action research project. And they took two groups. They took the content area of Civil War. One group taught Sage on the Stage, typical traditional, and the other group taught using very progressive, innovative applications, project-based instructional models. At the end of the study, both groups were given identical teacher construction tests of their knowledge of the Civil War, both groups. Which group did better? Okay, so we got a bunch of people that say second. Anybody say first group? However, you know I'm not going to leave you there. 1 year later, the traditional group could recall almost nothing about that historical content. It had all been shoved in, regurgitated for the moment, and that when they defined history, they defined it as record of the facts of the past, where the students in the digital group displayed elaborate concepts and ideas about what they had extended to others in the area of history, and they said that history was a process of interpreting the past from different perspectives. Change is hard. It's always premature. It is. I know it is. The real question we have to ask ourselves is, are we willing to change with a big C and realize it's not going to be a science? It's going to be incredibly messy. You and I are the last generation. We're the last generation that had the prerogative of deciding, the privilege, if you will, of deciding whether or not we wanted to master technology. All of you know highly successful people who are techno-resistant, that are not technologically literate. All of you. Right? However, the kids that are under your watch now, the babies that are in your classroom, the people that you're seeing through the educational process will not be given that privilege. That if they don't master these skills and they don't learn them, many of them, most of your high poverty, high needs kids do not learn them within the safety net of your classroom, then you are doing them a disservice. I would go so far as to challenge you and tell you you have a moral responsibility to make sure that these kids on your watch get the skills that they're going to need to be successful in the 21st century, or you're only adding to the problem. If you need a reason to master this, to get involved and to learn as fast as the world's changing and as stressful as it might seem, do it for the children's sake. Thank you very much.